still casting as you do a movie. You still need your box office stars. Now, you want your box office stars to do something a bit different to what you're used to. So if you have to have your T-Rex, it needs to do something different. But you also want the animals that are going to give you the comedy, the sad story.
Ready to talk some dino talk today?
Let's talk dinos.
Oh man, so much to touch on here. I'm gonna start by asking the people behind this. Like, you have obviously Hans Zimmer scoring some of this stuff. Jon Favreau is co-producing it too. David Attenborough doing the voice. I mean, you got the best of the best part of this show. This is a big production in that sense, just like by the people that just the look of it and the people involved with this. Was this a plan along the way, or just kind of happened organically that everyone got attached to this to make it feel so big?
It was the plan.
Nice.
Yeah, seriously, because when we set off on this journey, there was an ambition to make Planet Earth, but make it with dinosaurs. So take it, as we've said, go back in a time machine with all the gear and all the crews that make Planet Earth, open the doors, start filming as if it was if we were really there. And it needs to look like that, and it needs to have sound like that. So it needs to look like that. That's Jon. It needs to sound like that. That's Hans. And it needs to be told like that. That's David. So yeah, and it has to be made like that. That's the BBC Natural History Unit. So those are the four elements that you have to make Planet Earth. And if you're making Planet Earth 66 million years ago, you have to have those four elements. So yeah,
there you go.
That's the team.
To me, it felt very cinematic, like almost in a movie sense instead of a show. I mean, now today's shows are so high quality all around, but there's an element of this being sort of a documentary, but being a story. I feel like each episode has a real story to follow behind, and not just like a look at like, oh, these were dinosaurs, and sort of the look at how cool the visuals are, but there's actually a story to follow. How important was incorporating that element to it, that you are going on a journey, not only kind of visually and sound-wise, but actually a story to follow on each sort of episode?
Well, that's great that you think that, because that was the aim as well. I mean, it's so important. Mike's been making these types of films for 35 years, and for us to build on his experience and then the experience of Jon Favreau as well, to bring these two great storytellers together, it was right at the heart of what we were trying to set out and achieve. And we know from making things like Planet Earth and from Jon making things like Jungle Book and Lion King, that you need to have great story at the heart of everything that you're putting on the screen. Otherwise, people will turn off, won't they? It doesn't matter how good your visuals are, how stunning it is. If the story's not good, there's other things that you can look at. And so it was right at the heart of everything we set out to do, which is one of the reasons why it took so long to make, because we had to think long and hard about the stories. We had to call on the expertise of wildlife filmmakers from the BBC's Natural History Unit, and then look at the fossils that were around and which animals we could put into the stories. And it takes a really long time to get everything in place before you can then finally turn on the computers to do that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the object of the exercise was never to make the best dinosaurs that anybody's ever seen. They are the best dinosaurs that anybody's ever seen, but they're there in service of giving you hopefully the experience of what was it like. If I could go on a safari rather than to Africa today, I could go on a safari across the world 66 million years. What would I see? What would my experience be? How would I feel about this? That's what we tried to do. And that, I think, brings you say cinema, I think it is cinematic, but I think it's also rather epic. It has has this sort of big world view. And that was a kind of a move from the first series. I mean, we had it in the first series, but I think we really thought about the second season. We really want to make it feel like you're experiencing a world, and that's why the variety and the density and the diversity of animals and all sorts of other tricks we can talk about later if we have time, about, you know, the soundscape and all that kind of thing.
Speaking of selecting the animals and the creatures, like, you know, there's certain dinosaurs you're familiar with. The T-Rexes, they're kind of like, you know, there's like basic ones, but on this show I feel like I've seen and heard of things I've never actually heard of, different sort of dinosaurs. How'd you guys go about the selection process? Because I found that's interesting too. Not only the types of dinosaur species that aren't maybe known or aren't kind of mainstream in that way, but also the locational settings of them. Because we're literally, I think there's every weather pattern here that we've seen, different continents. Like, we are going on different sort of locations. Yeah, it's not just all set at one sort of thing. We go from, like, you know, literally the deserts to Antarctica. It's fascinating, to underwater. I love the different variety of Earth that's seen and where they were present at too. So I guess the two-parter of this is how did you go in the selection process of selecting the specific dinosaur to sort of feature, and the location of it and setting of it too?
Do you want to you start and I'll...
Well, yeah. So everything starts with the fossils, right? So we know which animals were around at this time, and so we're showing life only in around about 5 or 6 million years worth of geological time, and so we can look at the fossils from that period, and so the T-Rex was here and Triceratops was here, but they were only in certain parts of the world. But we want to tell a story about the whole world. So who was over here? Who was in Madagascar? Who was over here down in Antarctica? Who was in South America? Who was in Europe? And so we can then start to build those different stories based on which animals are found in which location. And then we can look at the paleobotany, so we can look to see what kind of plants were around at that time in those locations. And then we can start to build those stories and see which other characters are in. So that's another thing about this second series, is we bring in 25 new characters from the first series. And notice I say characters and not just dinosaurs, because we've got snakes, we've got reptiles, we've got amphibians, we've got birds, we've got fish, we've got mammals. You know, who knew that mammals were around at the time? The mammals had actually been around for almost about the same time as the dinosaurs. It's just they were mostly little small things. And then we get to our time period and we've got a big badger thing. We give it a story. So we've got this amazing fossil record that allows us to build this incredibly rich world. And then we choose which of our stories are going to fit into the different habitat types, and then build the sequences and then build the episode around the habitat. So in this series, we do Badlands, where we see animals living alongside volcanoes and in deserts. And then we have ones in swamps, and then we got ones in the oceans, etc., etc.
And on top of that, obviously you've got all those constraints, but you're still casting as you do a movie. You know, you still need your box office stars. Now, you want your box office stars to do something a bit different to what you're used to. So if you have to have your T-Rex, it needs to do something different. But you also want the animals that are going to give you the comedy, the sad story. You know, the ones that are going to give you the fight, the courtship. So that's another level of casting that you or selection that goes on top of all those things that Tim said. So it's like a matrix of opportunities, and you pick, I'll have that one, I'll have that one, have that one, have that one. So you get the best balance and the best range and the best level of surprise, so that over the series you get that sense of the scale.
No, it's scale, it's grand, it looks fantastic. Wish I had a bigger TV too sometimes to see this.
A big TV, yeah. It's great on 4K.
There you go. But the sound's great. You guys are definitely continuing something pretty spectacular, and just a fascinating story for everyone to really see. It's wide range from children to adults. I think will enjoy this. So hopefully we have more ideas for creatures and locations we have not seen yet for future seasons. But so far so good, guys. And thanks for bringing this to life, literally.
No, thank you.
There's 100 million years. Well, there's 400 million years of life we still haven't even looked at. So
there you go. Looking forward to what's next for sure.
This is Prehistoric Planet 2. Only on Apple TV+.